Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Katerina Sekvencová and I serve as Vice President of the Assembly of States Parties and I'll be your moderator tonight. I am pleased to welcome you to the first session of the virtual public roundtable with the candidates for Registrar of the International Criminal Court. I'd like to show my appreciation to the court and its registry in particular for providing us with the technical support to carry out this roundtable in this virtual format. The roundtable is being streamed online and recordings will also be made available online afterwards. Let me inform you at the very start that 2 candidates out of the 12 shortlisted ones withdrew their candidatures. These are Ms. Kate McIntosh from the first session and Mr. Amadi Ba from the second session. We will have 2 sessions in total, 1 session with group of 5 candidates. The division of the candidates into the respective sessions was decided by drawing lots at the last Hague Working Group meeting of 15 September. I will moderate the first 2 sessions on behalf of states parties. I'm also pleased to welcome 2 representatives of civil society who will act as co-moderators, Ms. Evelyn Ankuma from Africa Legal Aid and Ms. Alejandra Vicente from Redress. Today's co-moderator will be Evelyn Ankuma. I am pleased to welcome to this roundtable today the 5 first candidates for registrar in alphabetical order. Mr. Juan Pablo Alban Alencastro, Ms. Fidelma Teresa Donlon, Ms. Purajo Julien Kuda, Mr. Christian Marr, Ms. Inger Marie Tuma. Thank you for being with us today. Before we begin, in order to assist the interpreters with their work, I'd like to ask the candidates to please pause for a few seconds before beginning to speak when they are giving the floor. This will ensure that the interpretation can run smoothly. In order to minimize interruptions, we would also like to request the candidates to only speak when the floor is given to them by the moderators and to mute their microphones when they have finished speaking. For the first segment of our roundtable, we will give each of the candidates an opportunity to make an introductory statement outlining their candidacies and their vision for the role of registrar. We will have these statements in alphabetical order, and candidates have been given up to 4 minutes each. I would kindly ask you to respect the allocated time for the introduction part, but also when answering the questions and for your closing remarks. I would like to invite Mr. Alban to begin. Mr. Alban, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I would like to start by recognizing what a great honor it is for me to have been included in a list of such wonderful and competent colleagues, and I truly wish them all the best in what is left of this selection process. Secondly, I would like to thank the Court, the Assembly of State Parties to the Rome Statute, and civil society organizations at large for making this a transparent and competitive process where our qualifications, merits, and experience are what matters instead of a political one where influences or proximity blur away what is important. I want to take this opportunity to share briefly with you what I believe are the critical aspects to enhance the efficiency of the registry, which is fundamental for the court to live up to its full potential in putting an end to impunity for the most heinous crimes and human rights violations all around the world, and with that upholding peace, rule of law, and democratic values. It is undisputable that managerial practices legitimize and thus sustain the institutions in which they are embedded. And although a great effort in its time, the revision process concluded in June 2015 and the ulterior projects to ensure a more efficient and effective work by the registry in my opinion, have been insufficient thus far. I identify at least four main reasons for that. Budgetary planning and execution still face important shortcomings. Awareness about the court's work and its impact is still very limited around the world, and hence the legitimacy of the efforts of the tribunal is at stake. There is little involvement of the court in helping develop national justice response capacity for the commission of international crimes. And I think a more sensible approach to the victim's situation and expectations is missing. As many other international bodies working to uphold justice and human rights, the court lacks enough resources. That's the case also in regional systems such as the Inter-American Human Rights System. It is also the case at the universal level with the treaty body system of the United Nations. But aside from the discussion on whether the state's contributions are sufficient, I believe it is important to put on the table the question on whether the use of allocated resources is appropriate. A full revision and a comprehensive audit of the programs being implemented in the various sections of the court, and especially in the registry, which is the section that receives the larger amount of the budget, is necessary to move towards a more rational use of limited resources that support the court's activities. I think it is important to go forward in reviewing the practices that have been implemented in this regard inside the court in order to, as I mentioned, rationalize the use of resources. Regarding the second point that I mentioned, awareness about the court's work, in my opinion, much work is still needed to communicate to the public, and in particular to the communities and the victims affected by international crimes, about the court proceedings, about the decisions issued by the court, the evidence presented in the different cases, the reparations that could be ordered to benefit them, the enforcement of decisions issued by the court, among many other issues. And I believe that the success of the International Criminal Court in a great part depends on the dissemination of information to demonstrate that the international criminal justice system actually works, which up to this point, I believe is not the perception of the public in general. And also to empower victims to reach out to the court and to make their voices heard. And I think this is somehow related also to the last or the fourth point that I identified as something that needs additional work.
Thank you.
A more sensible approach to the situation of the victims.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to give the floor to Ms. Donlon. Ms. Donlon, you have the floor. Ms. Donlon, we cannot hear you.
Madam Vice President, Excellencies, representatives of civil society, fellow candidates, thank you for the opportunity and privilege to participate in this very important event. I am deeply aware that to be a successful registrar is to be a highly effective enabler and a constructive problem solver. For the past 6.5 years, I have successfully led a registry that delivers all the services needed to enable the judges of the Kosovo Specialist Chambers manage 4 simultaneous proceedings involving 8 accused. I also manage the preparation and negotiation of a biennial budget of 115 million euros with the European Commission and EU member states. Prior to that, I served as Deputy Registrar of the Special Court for Sierra Leone and the Bosnian War Crimes Chambers. If I were to be given the honour to serve as Registrar, I will enable the Presidency, the Chambers, the Office of the Prosecutor and other participants in proceedings to focus on their complex responsibilities with full confidence that the registry will provide the critical enabling services they require. I will enable states parties to be confident that their hard-earned financial contributions are soundly managed. I have a deep understanding of what the next ICC registrar must accomplish. I am confident I have the knowledge, skills, and commitment to succeed in the role. I believe I bring a unique holistic experience to the role, including fundraising and budget management, extensive bilateral and multilateral cooperation with states, management of detention facilities, legal aid schemes, victims' participation and witness protection programs. My effectiveness will be further strengthened by my expertise in administrative law and informal dispute settlement, including disciplinary and staff appeals proceedings. In my opinion, two of the critical challenges the ICC faces are, firstly, increasing the effectiveness of its core activities across the 16 situations before the court, and secondly, maintaining funding for an unprecedented workload as well as optimizing resources. To increase effectiveness, I will use my in-depth knowledge of all aspects of registry operations to plan and review the services provided. Under my leadership, the registry team will implement with excellence, hear and understand feedback in order to review and adapt. If there are problems, we will claim ownership of them and find innovative and effective solutions. With respect to critical funding and resources, I will firstly leverage my strong people and relationship skills to work with the other organs of the court to entrench a unified and effective approach to strategic planning and budgeting. Secondly, I will ensure transparent and constructive dialogue with the Committee on Budget and Finance and states parties during budget negotiations. And thirdly, subject to regulatory amendment and the approval of the President, I would deploy my successful management experience of staff mobility procedures. I heavily invest in tackling underrepresentation and maintaining a safe and inclusive work environment. This is not just a legal requirement, it is the key to unlock the full potential of a diverse, motivated and high-performing team. This year, I am proud that our court achieved gender parity at expert and management level, as well as providing bespoke training on the prevention of harassment to all staff. Excellencies, I firmly believe that organisational culture must be caught by staff, not just taught through regulatory documents and trainings. People will adopt the behaviour and values of the leaders and managers with whom they work. If I were to be elected, I will do that which I have done in my current role. That is, lead the registry with integrity and unify our staff around the values of mutual respect and honour to underpin a relentless commitment to the delivery of the highest quality services. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. I would like now to give the floor to Mr. Kuda. Mr. Kuda, you have the floor.
Madame la Vice-Présidente,
Madam Vice President, ladies and gentlemen, participants at this roundtable, first of all, I would like to thank you for granting me the honour of presenting my candidacy to your distinguished institution. In order to do this, I would like to focus on three main elements. The first of these is procedure. We know, of course, that form keeps substance in good condition. So we need to make sure that procedure has the right procedure is followed to make sure that the right decisions could be taken. I've been working in this field for over 20 years, and I'm now the head of registry for the Court of Cassation in Burkina Faso, and this is the highest legal instance in the country. I'm also responsible for managing trials right from start to finish. I've also had the advantage of managing funds, and I've also worked as a registrar and clerk. I've also participated in the MONUSCO UN mission, where I worked as the court management expert, and in that my role was to provide assistance and advice to all of the relevant stakeholders and provide relevant notification. And so this is an area that I have a great deal of expertise in. Now, the second element I'd like to focus on is the requirement for a fair trial. Now, this, of course, is an internationally recognized requirement, and the ICC focuses on this. This involves making sure that victims receive all necessary information and advice that they need to allow them to defend their case. And then, secondly, it's important to provide assistance to victims to make sure that they can be involved in all different stages of any trial or proceedings. This involves providing them with support and assistance to ensure that all their decisions can be followed. And the third element I'd like to focus on is effective management of funds and human resources. This is absolutely vital, and sometimes there can be difficulties in this field. I have managed a large amount of funding before. For example, I've managed a budget of over $2 billion, and in another of my roles, I managed a budget of over $100 million, and also as part of the UN, I managed sizable projects. And not only, apart from managing large amounts of funds, I've also managed a great deal of personnel. And I think, of course, in this work, it's important to make sure that anyone working within a registry is respected, and they know that they are respected. And this obviously involves providing explanations where necessary and providing all information. Now, of course, in Burkina Faso, there are over 600 people working within the registry, and my job has been to help provide orientation and guidance to make sure that everyone can carry out their activities in a professional manner. So, I must say, most humbly, that I believe I have all the necessary qualities to work as the registrar of the International Criminal Court. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you. I would like now to give the floor to Mr. Marr. Mr. Marr, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Vice President, honorable judges, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I greatly appreciate this opportunity to participate in this roundtable and to discuss my candidacy. As a national of Japan, it's also a great honor for me to be the very first candidate from an Asia-Pacific state party to be shortlisted for the position of registrar. Born to a Japanese mother and a Japanese father of Danish and German ancestry, I grew up in Tokyo. I joined the UN soon after graduating from law school. Following a 20-year career at the UN, since my arrival here in 2016, I've served as the Director of External Operations with the Registry of the ICC. In my current capacity, I oversee a diverse team of over 200 staff in a division I helped to build up from scratch. Having attained one of the highest ratings among senior managers in the most recent staff survey, I'm confident of my ability to build, motivate, and manage large teams. I'm in charge of a number of critical functions at the court, such as witness protection, judicial cooperation, outreach, international cooperation, and the operations of all our field offices. As the co-chair of the Inter-Organ Crisis Management Team on the COVID pandemic and the leader of the registry team set up to ensure business continuity in the midst of US sanctions, I directly managed some of the biggest crises that the court has confronted. Now, as far as my vision for what I plan to do as the registrar, my vision is one of continuity plus. Allow me to explain. The registry, under the leadership of Peter Lewis, has spent the past 5 years putting in place a variety of tools aimed at enhancing its efficiency and effectiveness. This helped inject transparency and trust into our relationship with states parties, as well as with other organs and parties to which the registry provides services. A key feature of these enhancements involve the much needed establishment of essential metrics, such as key performance indicators and staff surveys, which allow for an objective assessment of the registry's work when measured over time. I would thus consolidate the achievements of the past 5 years and focus on building on the excellent progress made. At the same time, challenges remain. Our courtrooms are busier than ever, so ensuring effective and efficient support for the simultaneous trials presently taking place is critical. The IER process has left us with hundreds of recommendations. The focus now needs to be on implementing these recommendations. With new and high-profile situations opening up, we need to find cost-efficient and flexible ways of providing operational support in entirely new parts of the world. We have a large number of outstanding warrants. We need to develop a systematic way of tracking down these suspects and securing arrests. And more needs to be done to ensure that the court is a rewarding and safe place for all its staff. Now, in pursuing these challenges as an integral part of the plus portion of Continuity Plus, I want to draw greater emphasis on the need for continuous improvement, or kaizen, as we call it in Japanese. This focus on constantly encouraging incremental improvements and efficiencies in our daily work and creating the conditions conducive for staff to be able to do so is a guarantee, in my experience, that we remain dynamic as an organization and flexible enough to deal with the tremendous challenges which await the court. So instead of revolution, I'm calling for steady and constant evolution as we continuously look for areas of improvement. I thank you for this opportunity, and I look forward to addressing your questions.
Thank you. I would like now to give the floor to Ms. Tuma. Ms. Tuma, you have the floor. We can't hear you, Ms. Tuma.
Yeah, sorry for that. Good afternoon, Vice President, Madam Vice President, and Ambassador, as well as honorable judges and ladies and gentlemen and participants in this roundtable discussion. I'm very pleased and honored to have been invited to this session today. I will give a brief background on myself and also my vision as I see it regarding the Registrar. I have been a leader of staff in the judiciary in Sweden as a prosecutor, internationally as a prosecutor at ICC, war crime judge at War Crime Chamber in Sarajevo, criminal judge in Kosovo, and presently as European Union expert appointed by European Union External Action Service to foster the justice reform of Albania. I have had responsibilities for high-profile cases in highly politicized environments. I have led teams of different positions in a high team spirit. The teams are comprised of judges and prosecutors, investigators, lawyers, analysts and experts and others, and including administrative staff. At all times, I have delivered the expected results, made the necessary priorities, as well dealt with a wide range of different sensitive issues and matters under pressure. I have a decade of experience of the gravest crimes of international concern as judge and prosecutor in post-conflict countries. I am well familiar with the importance of receiving excellent court service in order to manage a court and all its activities. I have also been a manager of a human rights organization, the Raoul Wallenberg Institute, headquartered in Lund, with 6 field offices around the world in Africa, Asia, Europe, Indonesia, and the Middle East, funded by public funds and private donations. As a director, I had the full managerial responsibility including but not limited to the management of the human resources, the effective and transparent budget process, safety and security of all its offices, are reported annually to a board of trustees, which yearly approve the suggested strategic plans and the budget. I successfully reviewed and improved the staff policies, including the salary scales, new strategies such as communication plan, outreach strategies, new positions, established additional field offices, and secured the long-term funding by public funds and fundraising funds to the Institute. To summarize, I have a long-standing, deep and extensive knowledge of a national and international judiciary systems, as well as to manage public funds and fundraising. I have years of experience of leadership. I know all the responsibilities and qualities a leader must uphold to succeed in this role. And I know that I would give my very all to the position of registrar should I be appointed, and I should strive to make every day count for the good of the ICC. I will seek to effectively and efficiently implement the next strategic plan with a cost-effective use of the allocated budget. I would also implement any suggested improvements by the review mechanism that are approved and considered and discussed. I would also seek to enhance the staff engagement and the contentment of the staff. Staff engagement is a key factor for the delivery of expected results. This is a continued process. However, it is a true leadership issue to engage the staff and to build trust. All managers at all levels should therefore be trained in modern leadership, and perhaps this is already underway or has been enforced at ICC. Of course, I would apply gender and geographic balance in the recruitment process, which is of importance. Another key factor for excellent result of the court. Yeah?
Yeah, please close up your introductory statement.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. This concludes the opening statements. We'll now begin a segment with questions for the candidates submitted by states parties. We have allocated approximately 45 minutes for this segment. I'll ask the candidates 3 questions. I'll ask to limit the responses to a maximum of 3 minutes for the first question and a maximum of 2 minutes for the following 2 questions. Candidates will be called to respond to the questions in a random order. The order of speakers for the first question will be Ms. Donlon, Mr. Kuda, Mr. Marr, Ms. Touma, and Mr. Alban. The first question. Describe your experience managing large court or institutional budgets. Please explain the budget amount that you are responsible for executing in your current workplace. In addition, what is your assessment of the current resources available to the ICC, and what measures would you take to ensure that they are used most effectively? Ms. Donlon, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for your question, Madam President. Madam Vice President, excuse me. In relation to the first part of the question and my experience in managing court budgets, I will firstly touch upon my experience as the Deputy Registrar of the War Crimes Chambers in Bosnia and Herzegovina. That was a court funded by voluntary contributions from interested states. And in terms of the overall management of those funds, a key function I carried out was fundraising upwards of $24 million for the successful operations of the Bosnian War Crimes Chamber, and subsequently directing and overseeing the work of the Finance Department. Next, as Deputy Registrar of the Special Court for Sierra Leone, another court that was funded from voluntary donations, I worked as Deputy Registrar, and many of you may be aware that the challenges the SCSL faced were in fact that at times the voluntary funds did not meet the needs to cover the operations of the court, and consequently, by application of the law on the Special Court for Sierra Leone, we could approach the General Assembly for subvention grants. So in addition to my experience from Bosnia, from the Special Court for Sierra Leone as Deputy Registrar supporting the Registrar of the Court, I have experience in budget management from voluntary contributions, but also circumstances involving approaching the General Assembly for subvention grants. In my current role, I am responsible for the negotiation and also management of a budget, a biennial budget of 115 million euros with the European Commission and EU member states. In terms of the success of securing those funds, we are extremely focused at the Kosovo Specialist Chambers on strategic budget planning and also transparent dialogue with the member states in terms of the budget process. We are also extremely focused on the efficient management of financial and human resources, which brings me to the second part of your question, which is the resources of the ICC and the effective management of such resources. In terms of my experience, I would propose, and I certainly would if I had the honour to be elected, applying my experience not only in strategic planning of budgets and presentation of those budgets to states parties, but also ensuring that the performance goals of all staff are connected very closely with the actual strategic plans of the court. That is a way of ensuring that we are all singing from the same spreadsheet across an organisation, and ensuring that the senior management team is heavily invested with staff in ensuring performance that meets the strategic goals of the court. In addition,
I'm sorry,
I'll
need to interrupt you. I'm sorry, your time is up. Thank you very much for your answer.
Thank you.
The next, I would ask Mr. Kuda. Please, you have the floor.
Merci, Madame la
Thank you very much, Madam Vice President, attendees at the round table. To reply to that question, I would like to mention my experience at the Ouagadougou court, of which I was working at for over 7 years. There are various different types of funds that the chief registrar is in charge of at that body. First of all, revenue, because the legal activity, of course, involves various types of revenue, which the chief registrar manages. At that point, I had to collect and then spend those resources. At that time, it was around 4 million euros per month that I was managing. And then alongside those revenues, there was general funds. And the funds that I managed were extremely significant. And then also, when court proceedings were carried out, there was a need to ensure that all of these amounts were managed effectively, and the cumulative amount of all of the funds that I managed was 2 billion CFA francs, which I managed for over 7 years. I have another type of experience in managing funds, which was at the Court of Cassation at Burkina Faso, where I am now. Now, in that case, the proceedings are not provided fully free of charge. Sometimes certain charges are made, so I'm in charge of collecting and spending those funds. And also, most of all, I would like to underline my experience at MONUSCO, where I've been in charge of projects such as quick impact projects. And I was in charge of setting up awareness projects, for example. And through those, I was able to work in various different areas. Alongside all of this, I've also planned and carried out training sessions for colleagues. And we've held mobile hearings in various different regions as well. So that's what I would like to say about my experience. And in terms of the budget of the ICC, I think that this needs to be results-based management. Each different type of fund needs to be assigned to a certain area with specific expected results. And I think to make sure that that the institution is accountable to member states. Thank you very much. That's what I have to say in response to that question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker will be Mr. Marr. Mr. Marr, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. In terms of my experience managing the budget, my current budget is 21.5 million euros that I manage directly within my division through the 3 sections I have at headquarters and the 7 duty stations, including our liaison office in New York. I'm also involved in the management of the overall budget of the registry. I'm a member of the registry management team, which is the highest forum within the registry that convenes to decide, to advise and informs the registrar on the various strategic directions in terms of making the budget available. And that amount for the registry is 79.2 for the year. Now, in terms of how I would manage the overall resources of the registry and the court, it's very clear that we're facing unprecedented amounts of workload going into 2023. We have 3 consecutive trials, 16 situations, 6 cases in pre-trial, 5 reparations, and 10 investigations. We are busy. All this in times of very high inflation rates, which is playing itself out in terms of higher salary requirements for the court and its staff, which is making a very difficult making us make very difficult choices. And all this playing out when states themselves are struggling with the impact of COVID, inflation, and the war in Ukraine. So in this sense, it's critically important that we make the best use of our resources and ensure value for money in terms of the funding provided to the court by member states. The question becomes, how do we do this? I want to propose 3 areas where we need to work on or expand upon where we're currently working on. One is greater transparency in the administrative workings of the court. This has been achieved through mainstreaming measurable indicators as part of the working practices of the court. There's also now an effort starting with the 2023 budget to make a direct link between the strategic planning exercise of the court and the use of KPIs in the court. This allows us to have quantifiable and objective indicators to actually be clear that we're providing value for money. The second is that we need better coordination with our internal clients to ensure that whatever we are putting in our budget is done in terms of discussions with our key clients, and that we're able to prioritize in an efficient manner so that indeed the resources allocated are done so efficiently. And the third is that we need to undertake more activities to eliminate any duplication in these functions. And some of the pilot projects that I have initiated with OTP, like in terms of avoiding duplication. Open source country research is a good initiative in that regard, which I'd like to build on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker on my list is Ms. Tuma. Ms. Tuma, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Madam Ambassador. Yeah, I have managed public funds and private donation at the Raoul Wallenberg Institute, as I said earlier, headquartered in Lund with 6 field offices. It was published funds from the government, and it came through the Swedish International Development Agency. And the amount at the time was about 200 million euros a year. I was able to be very cost effective. The institute at the time needed to be reorganized, policies need to be reviewed, but the institute needed also to seek new areas of its performances and its programs. And I was able, with the team at the institute, to identify new areas, and also with a successful fundraising to attract new money to the institute. So there was a huge, actually, a private donation from a Swedish private organization and foundation that donated a substantial a lot of money to the institute, which made the institute able to employ new staff, etc., and also a share of human rights, and a library as well that could be updated to a reasonable standard. So that is what I did. And also at the institute at the time, I worked with the controller and the deputy director closely in order to have a transparent and effective budget process, which was yearly also presented to the board of trustees, which approved it. Regarding the use of resources at ICC, I listened to the former speakers here, and I can also say that I do agree with everyone that it's important, of course, to allocate the budget wisely and to use the financial resources wisely and not to duplicate, for instance. There could be possibilities to move field staff, for instance, from one field office that should be downsized to another field office, for instance. A key factor for me is staff engagement and staff content. My long experience in management and also in the judiciary and working with teams and people is that if the staff is content, the staff will produce and they will be effective, which I would emphasize as well as one factor to use actually the money wisely. And of course, as been said here before, with the indicators and the strategic plan, etc., which is very useful in order to allocate the budget wisely. So that is what I have to say for this question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker will be Mr. Alban. Mr. Alban, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. In this regard, probably the most relevant experience I had was as a member of the Council of the Judiciary in my country. This is the highest administrative and financial body of the judicial branch, with a staff of over 12,000 persons nationwide, and enormous resources to guarantee the functioning of the courts, the prosecutor's office, and the public defender's office. And from the beginning, I've been essential to design processes to guarantee efficiency in the use of resources and accountability. Further, during my career, I have managed private, public, and international legal organizations and institutions with medium to large teams. At the moment, I manage the whole team of the public interest clinics at the university where I teach, which is over 150 people, comprising professionals with very different backgrounds and experiences. And in this regard, I believe it is important to highlight that in those settings, I worked with result-based budgeting systems, both at the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights and at the university where I'm currently teaching, University San Francisco de Quito, and I had great success. Since you are asking for our proposal, as I mentioned in my introductory remarks, I am aware that the court lacks enough resources. And if I am elected, my strategy in this matter would be to promote a full revision and a comprehensive audit of the programs being implemented by the different sections of the court, and particularly by the registry, and further to rationalize the spending, to cut unnecessary expenses, this to guarantee the proper distribution of resources to the different areas and projects of the International Criminal Court, to reduce costs and promote a culture of efficiency in the use of resources, and of course of absolute transparency. That's my response to this first question, Madam Vice President.
Thank you very much. This wraps up the first question. Now we'll move to the second one, and here the order of the speakers will be Mr. Kuda, Mr. Mar, Ms. Touma, Mr. Alban, and Ms. Donlon. You will have 2 minutes for the second questions to respond. The ICC is both a court and an international organization with large international staff. This constitutes a managerial challenge. Do you have concrete experience with difficult managerial situation in an organization or an office under your supervision? Mr. Kuda, you have the floor.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam President, Vice President, rather. In response to that question, I would like to make a reference to my experience at the Supreme Court of Ouagadougou, where I worked for almost 7 years. And there we have around 50 registrars. And at the moment, at the Court of Cassation in Burkina Faso, that's the highest legal body in the country. That's where I work at the moment, and we have around 20 registrars. And I'd just like to clarify that according to our legislation, the Court of Cassation functions as the president of the Council of Discipline for all of the registrars. So I'm often called upon to find solutions to various different issues that arise, of which there are many. So this, of course, involves making sure that registrars carry out their responsibilities effectively. Or, for example, a registrar might bring up an issue about unequal distribution of tasks, or a female might mention a lack of respect from her male colleagues. And at this time, when these issues come up, often letters of explanations are provided, and sometimes people are referred to disciplinary hearings. I think it's important to communicate and exchange information in all cases. And often difficulties arise, and if we talk about them, we could find solutions. But of course, necessary sanctions can be also necessary at certain times when appropriate. So that's what I have to say about various different difficulties that have been encountered in my work and the solutions I found. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Mar. Mr. Mar, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice President. Yes, my experience would very much be that of the culture I currently encounter at the ICC. Clearly, the court would benefit from a change in its culture. What I personally notice most is that of the culture of fear, fear of making mistakes, fear of speaking up, fear of standing out. And these are destructive tendencies that can lead to an inefficient organization if left unaddressed. It also hardly creates an environment that's conducive for continuous improvement, where at the very least staff feel comfortable and free to be able to bring ideas up. A number of things need to be done and are currently being done, but I have a number of ideas. Clearly, one is that there needs to be a clear disciplinary measure to be put in place for individuals who are indeed found to be guilty of the most egregious forms of harassment. In the sense, there have to be consequences for those who are the harassers. We also need to put in place an alternate dispute mechanism, and steps are being taken to put in place an ombudsperson, which would be wonderful, because being able to de-escalate these problems at an early stage is critically important. I believe that staff also need to have avenues where they feel safe to report behavior. And most importantly, they need to know that these kinds of behaviors will be acted upon, and there'll be an investigation launched within a short period once it is released. Above and beyond, I believe that managers need to be trained more so that they're aware of these issues, they're on the lookout, and they also know how to provide guidance to people that come to them. And principals, needless to say, need to lead by example. One or two more points. I believe we need to have greater partnership with the Staff Union Council. I see them as part of the solution. They need to be made a genuine stakeholder in this. And finally, I do believe the court needs to focus on also looking at ways on rewarding good behavior, not just negative behavior. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Ms. Tuma. Ms. Tuma, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador. Yeah, I can say a little about a situation I have had, and that was eventually successful, solved. When I started as a manager as a specific workplace, the staff, including the management group, lacked trust into the leader, the manager. So the participants in the management group did not have trust in the manager. So I started from scratch, one can say. I noticed this quite early, at an early stage, and understood that this needs to be addressed, but with a sensitive hands. So I talked to the management group in order for them to explain to me what the difficulties are and how to solve that, and to give me examples and to give me also suggestions. It ended up with I had a training done by an external experts to train the management group in management, and also in different issues in order to build trust, not only amongst the participants in the management group, but also to the manager and to the other staff members in that workplace. Also a culture of fear in a way. Speaker said this is important, not to spread, absolutely not, but it's a management issue that needs to be addressed forcefully, but also with gentle hands, so to say. So this was the difficulties that I encountered, but with hard work, and also from my side to be personal, and to see that the people that was in this management group also were persons and had their difficulties, in different levels and in different ways. So also to be as a person, as a matured leader, need to be able to listen to the group of manager in this setting.
Thank you very much for your answer. I'll move to the next speaker. Mr. Alban, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. As I pointed out in my previous response, throughout my career, I had the opportunity to manage large teams, and I also had the responsibility to ensure their well-being, the well-being of all the members of those teams. And to be completely frank, in those settings, I have had very few confrontational situations within my teams, and even fewer workplace harassment, bullying, or abuse of authority situations among my supervisees. I believe that to a large extent, this is due to the fact that I try to create a friendly work environment. And if I am elected, I will for sure implement a modality of work, a culture of respect and accountability where everyone is recognized and heard, where we are all generous with our knowledge and support our colleagues, and where each worker has the confidence to approach their supervisors and the registry authorities to report situations that bother them or affect them or their colleagues, with the certainty that they will be addressed transparently and will be resolved expeditiously, and always, of course, giving the other person, the person allegedly responsible, the chance, the opportunity to defend him or herself and express their own points of view. But abuses, bullying, harassment will not be tolerated inside the registry of the court if I am elected.
Thank you very much. The last speaker for this question is Ms. Donlon. Ms. Donlon, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. As Registrar of the Kosovo Specialist Chambers, I am deeply committed and invest in creating a work environment that is inclusive and based on teamwork. That said, as is the case in any institution, problems can arise. My functions include acting as the final administrative authority in staff appeals cases and also disciplinary proceedings. I represent the court in staff cases before the staff appeals judge, and pursuant to the staff rules, my authority includes, after a final investigation and recommendations from a disciplinary board, issuing decisions including, if prohibited conduct reaches the level of serious misconduct, dismissal, fines, or other sanctions. I also actively promote the use of informal settlement. I have used coaching together with mediation to encourage teams to find understanding and work together. In a large organisation, I'm very proud that we have tackled gender underrepresentation in areas traditionally underrepresented, for example, security and witness protection. And due to our proactive measures, including outreach to suitably qualified candidates and strong work with our gender focal point, we have successfully increased the number of women in posts that were previously underrepresented. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This wraps up the second question. I'll move to the third question, and the order of speakers there will be Mr. Marr, Ms. Touma, Mr. Alban, Ms. Donlon, and Ms. Kuda, Mr. Kuda. So the third question will be for you to answer in 2 minutes maximum. And the question is, the findings of the independent expert review indicated that the court appears to suffer internally from distrust and a culture of fear. How would you promote a respectful and professional working culture at the ICC? Now I'll ask Mr. Marr to answer the question. Mr. Marr, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Vice President. In a way, I will go back because my previous answer addressed many of these elements of addressing the recommendation coming out from the IEI recommendation, but really to indicate that many of the measures that the court needs to put in place truly needs to be of a top-down measure. As I've indicated, there needs to be a clear disciplinary procedure in place, and staff need to see this work through so that individuals who are found guilty of the most egregious forms of harassment are indeed properly disciplined and held to account. And also, but the most important thing is that above and beyond just the discipline aspect, which we've had to a certain extent, but is the importance of having an interim measure where we are able to de-escalate by the arrival of an ombudsman. But the whole framework also in which managers are trained so that they care about the issue and they have the means of providing proper guidance to staff when they're approached in these instances is also very important as well. And really, as I mentioned previously, one of the important factors is to have a great partnership with the Staff Union Council so that they could work on developing initiatives together with the management, together with the registrar, on seeing how we could change the overall culture and give them, as genuine stakeholders in this outcome, a voice and also a role in getting this done. And the important thing, I believe, is having regular surveys that we can measure progress in terms of how we do in terms of a culture. We can have frequent pulse surveys to measure where we are above and beyond the major staff survey, which takes place every 3 years. So these would be some of the suggestions I would recommend. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Ms. Tuma. Ms. Tuma, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador. I do agree with Mr. Barr, his suggestions here. And I have also read the report with sadness, I must say, that it shouldn't exist a culture of fear in an organization or in a court, or discrimination, etc. It's a sad reading, actually. But anyhow, it happens and it can happen. And that's why it's important to address these issues, of course. I would also add to what Mr. Barr mentioned here. Again, as I said earlier, it's a leadership issue. Even though there could be tools, etc., and disciplinary measures, etc., and also absolutely to have a partnership with the staff union and surveys, etc. But at the end, it is a true leadership issue. So a leader, the registrar in this case, or any other leader of divisions, etc., they need and must go show with good examples how to be a good leader and how to show respect to each staff member. It's about gender balance. It's about not to discriminate anyone. It is to observe and to see the staff and to be present as a leader. Not only to have leader courses, to have trainings, to have surveys, etc. Of course, that is a tool to be used by the true leader in order to engage and to enhance the staff contentment. But at the end, it is for the leaders to take on a true leadership role. And to do that as a leader, there are different ways, avenues. As I mentioned earlier, I had difficulties actually, which I approached by having discussions with the management group, serious discussions, and to do that with the rest of the staff to see where the problems are and start there, but to be a present leader and to be a leader that listens to the staff. If it's health issues or balance issues, etc., it is truly important for me.
Thank you very much.
And I would, because I have my own experiences, so I would seek to do that as well as a registrar. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Now I'll ask Mr. Alban to answer the question. Mr. Alban, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. The findings of the independent review should be taken seriously. Once again, I have to point out the relevance of a culture of transparency in the whole court, but in particular in the registry. The perception by the staff at large and the affected persons in particular about the inutility of internal accountability can affect their performance, and with that, the efficiency and effectiveness of the registry and ultimately of the court. So considering privacy issues, I nevertheless believe that inside a criminal tribunal, impunity should not have a place and transparency should be the rule. So the complement of the culture of respect and accountability, where everyone is recognized and heard that I referred to before, should be a simplified, effective, and transparent disciplinary procedure, which imposes the consequences necessary for those responsible for creating this culture of fear that is referred to in the findings of the independent review. The tools in order to apply these consequences and to simplify the procedure and to basically instill a culture of complaining, of telling what's going on, could be discussed and could be mediation, or could be, I don't know, inquiries, or could be regular meetings of the staff in different sections. But at the end of the day, the important outcome should be that effective consequences are imposed.
Thank you. The next speaker is Ms. Donlon. Ms. Donlon, you have the floor.
Thank you. One of the excellent outcomes from the IER report, I believe, is the adoption in April by the International Criminal Court of the administrative instruction addressing harassment, sexual harassment, and abuse of authority. In my court at the moment, we have successfully ensured the rollout of training to all staff by the end of this year of anti-harassment training. And in terms of promoting a culture in the ICC that is free from harassment, I would give my full backing to training for all staff on the administrative instruction, but also the training that's referenced in the instruction, which is the training to managers and others on how to deal correctly with individuals who may be affected by prohibited behaviour. I would also demonstrate my full commitment to a harmonious work environment by encouraging an open discussion about the values of the court and a safe environment in the event people and staff feel those values are not upheld. I would make use of staff surveys and also pulse surveys to hear and understand what staff think about leadership and whether values are being upheld. In addition, working closely as I do with our gender focal point, I would also give my full backing to the excellent gender focal point in the International Criminal Court. And lastly, I would mention that in the event there is prohibited conduct reported, I would respond to that in a timely and also very sensitive way to ensure that the person reporting is comfortable and given all the support needed to deal with any form of process before the court. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'll ask Mr. Kuda. Mr. Kuda, you have the floor.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Thank you very much to all the participants of the roundtable. I believe that the IER report needs to be taken very seriously, and it's necessary to work towards finding solutions. People are afraid of what they don't know. If there's something you don't understand, then you cannot really adopt it and take ownership of it, and there will be distrust among people. I would like to just share an experience of mine that we had at the Court of Cassation in Burkina Faso. We created a mutual fund for people working at the Court of Cassation, and everyone is involved in that. And the objective of this mutual fund is to pay visits to people and also to celebrate events, and both positive and negative, to make sure that people can work together. I think it's very important to establish communication among people and support people whenever they have a need. And if people are isolated, then they sometimes withdraw into themselves and they end up being afraid of others. It's very important to understand that the better we know each other and the better we express solidarity with one another, the better the working environment functions. So if people cooperate, then difficulties at work are reduced. I think everything must be put into action to make sure that people can communicate with one another and understand one another, to make sure that they can collaborate. And it's important for everyone to understand that there are various different activities we can set up to make sure that people do understand one another better. Thank you.
Thank you. We now turn to the second segment of today's session, questions submitted by civil society. We have allocated approximately 30 minutes for this segment. I would like to give the floor to our co-moderator representing civil society, Ms. Evelyn Ankuma. Ms. Ankuma, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Excellencies, distinguished candidates, observers, all formalities hereby fulfilled. I am pleased to moderate this segment on behalf of civil society, ensuring a fair, inclusive, and transparent process for the election of the next Registrar of the International Criminal Court. Without further ado, the first question is, the court's distance from affected communities creates challenges of access and engagement with victims. How would you enhance the presence and visibility of the court and ensure effective outreach to victims and affected communities? Please mention one or two key priority actions you would take. Each candidate has 2 minutes to answer this question. I will first start with Mr. Alban Alencastro, and then Ms. Donlon, Mr. Kuda, Mr. Ma, and then Ms. Tuma. Mr. Alencastro, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I believe that international institutions in general are designed and created to serve the people. And sometimes bureaucracy makes us miss the point of what exactly is it we are doing. I think indeed the court is at this point distant from the communities and victims it is serving. And I think it is important to set up, and I was mentioning that in my introductory remarks, to set up a process where the current outreach mechanisms in place by the registry of the court are reviewed, and more advantage of new technologies and all the channels that the registry and the court have to disseminate what they are doing are used in order to inform the people. But aside from informing the people, that I believe is not enough to cut this distance to the communities and victims that the court right now has. So I believe it is very, very, very important to review the logic that the court right now uses to address the situation, the suffering, the expectations of the victims. And the registry should have a more sensible approach to the victim situation. The ICC was never meant to deal with each and every case. Rather, its competence was designed with the idea of enhancing the capabilities of national authorities to address international crimes. But in order to do so, probably the first step is to empower the victims, is to empower the communities where these crimes happen, in order for them to request the authorities to do something, to act, and to do so. A lot more presence in the ground is needed. So I think if I am elected,
Thank you very much.
Work.
Your time is up.
Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Donlon, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much for this very important question. In terms of setting key priorities, I would draw on my outreach experience from the war crimes chambers in Bosnia, the Special Court for Sierra Leone, which had an excellent outreach program, and also my work in the Kosovo Specialist Chambers. Key priorities I would identify, firstly, would be establishing and enhancing the outreach work of the ICC by facilitating two-way communication with affected communities and victims. That would entail receiving feedback and ensuring that the messages that the communities are receiving are in fact on point and that they're receiving in a way that is helpful for them. Secondly, in terms of bridging the gap between The Hague and situation countries, I would focus on strengthening field office presence. And in that regard, I would look for synergies and also endeavour to have a very holistic plan to field offices, particularly with the Trust Fund for Victims and also the VPRS, so that we are connected with communities and victims in the country, and in terms ensuring that the connectivity spreads not only from field offices but back to headquarters in The Hague. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kuda.
Bien, je vous remercie, Madame.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice President.
Il faut dire que c'est vrai que
I would say that
la Cour pénale
indeed the International
internationale
Criminal
isolée
Court
peut être loin
can sometimes seem isolated and far away
et
from
très
the
efficace.
litigants,
Mais une autre chose est que la Cour pénale
but
internationale ne peut pas se déployer.
it can also
Donc, ce serait toujours un objectif.
it also needs to expand its reach, and I think we need to make sure that we focus on the courts in different areas and regions and communicate with them, and as well, and we need to carry out awareness raising activities with different populations. Various different activities could be developed among different communities. For example, we developed some activities in Congo with various different populations. The aim was to provide awareness-raising activities through the radio and through holding meetings and gatherings to explain what the court is doing. And this helps people to feel closer to the courts and tribunals that they're dealing with, because those are the people they serve, and the victims are the ones that need to be assisted by the ICC. And in my opinion, it's also necessary, and I believe I mentioned this already in one of the questionnaires or documents I submitted already, I think that we need to deal with the court in Rwanda and the specialized courts in the CAR, for example, and communicate with those different courts. For certain very critical regions, we should set up institutions and bodies locally to allow people to have close contact with these different bodies, and this will help the ICC to become better known itself.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Ma, you have 2 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ankuma. I fully agree that there's no doubt about the important role that outreach plays in terms of reaching out to victims, as well as securing their confidence and the support of their communities in situations where the court operates. Now, in an ideal world, one of the biggest priorities would be the allocation of more resources that we can always use. But having said that, there is a limit, as we've discussed already, with the budget difficulties. From my experience, I think that then the priorities becomes on relying on partnerships so that we can find ways of stretching our limited resources, and at the same time also relying on highly creative ways of tailoring our message to suit local conditions, cultural sensitivities, and languages. Just to give you an example, we have a project in 2017 called the Access to Justice Project. We started in Uganda. It had public screenings of videos from the trial. We had a popular call-in radio program where we had 14 million listeners. We had listening clubs where people who were listening on these calling programs were able to discuss within their communities. And also we invited community leaders and religious leaders from their communities to come to The Hague, witness the trial firsthand, go home and talk about it. So really, this interactive movement from just people receiving information to feeding back and making it a far more dynamic process. So this is something I certainly have been supporting over the past few years. And these examples, like the example I gave you, has spawned off additional projects in our other country offices that have taken some of the best practices from many of these ideas, which are not necessarily high cost, but very high in terms of creativity. And we've been able to replicate it in many different settings as a result. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Ms. Tuma.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Yes, of course, this is a very important issue to raise awareness for the victims and witnesses, and to reduce the gap between the headquarters in The Hague and also the witnesses in situation countries as well. I have my own experience in this field, and that is from my work at ICTY, at OTP, and working out in the field and meeting victims and witnesses. Really, I understood the need for the victims and the witnesses to be aware of the possibilities to be part, what would happen to them if they became at ICTY a witness in the hearings. The usage of a field office is excellent, actually. To have field offices of course, in the situation countries, and at the field office, perhaps to have a devoted local staff member from that specific country who knows the culture, who knows the language, etc., and can also be the messenger between the field, the victims, and witnesses, and The Hague. I think that would be a useful tool, as well as also to raise awareness, communication, and use technical means in different ways. As a judge at the Sarajevo War Crimes Chamber, the courtrooms were full of listeners to the trials. And so I really realized that the communication out to the population of what the court did and the hearings and the result of the hearings was essential. So to do that in ICC context, using workshops, inviting civil society, not only at the field offices, but also in different
Thank
seminars
you very
at
much.
the headquarters. Thank you.
Next question. What measures would you take to increase gender and geographic diversity, particularly in senior management positions? Each candidate has 2 minutes to answer this question. I'll first give the floor to Ms. Tuma, and then Mr. Ma, Mr. Kuda, Ms. Dunlon, and then Mr. Alban Alencastro. So, Ms. Tuma, you have the floor again.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this is an important issue, as I also read that from the position of P4 and up to the management level, not so many females are having those positions. And I think it's important during the recruitment process that to seek to have a gender balance, as we can see here today, actually, but also for female in lower, if I may say so, positions, to see that it's worthwhile to strive to be productive in the work in order to have possibilities to be promoted. Recruitment is important, and also the persons or the staff who is handling the recruitment process is of course important for them to have a view of gender balance. That is one thing, and for the staff to especially the female staff and also the male staff, to apply for positions. This is also important, and that is worthwhile to apply for positions. I saw in one reading that there are mentor programs for women, which is very awardable and a good action. I really believe in that. But also, why not to have a mentor program also for the male staff members, in order for some male staff members to understand that females can absolutely contribute to an effective work result as well. And geographic balance, as is done here, for instance, to have applicants and candidates shortlisted from different parts of the world. And then at the end, to have a balance from different parts of the world, different positions, to have a reasonable geographic balance is, of course, in order for the credibility of the court and working to strive to enhance the member as
Thank you
the
very
number of member
much.
states to the court.
Thank you
Okay,
very
thank
much.
you. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Ma.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ankuma. Given that we only have 2 minutes, and I will be a bit hard stretched to be very specific in terms of solutions for both gender and geographic, because I think there are different solutions required for both, but I'll be a bit general in my answer. I think steps that we take to proactively encourage people, both from a geographical standpoint as well as gender, at particularly the P4 and above levels, to apply is quite important, because we see in our statistics that there's a very direct correlation between the low number of applicants and the number of positions that are ultimately we end up with in the court. So we need to start with their proactive ways. We've been using social media to reach out to people who otherwise wouldn't have even considered the court as a career option. So that's something we definitely need to work on. Having a gender observer on the gender standpoint, from a geographical standpoint as well, having observers in recruitment panels that focus on these issues, I think it's something that we definitely should put in place. The use of generic rosters, which ideally allocates a certain percentage for both taking gender into account as well as geographical representation into account, I think will certainly help address some of these concerns that we have. But I just want to illustrate that there is no easy fix. It will require a number of efforts that we need to do. We've already started a number, but we will have to keep building on these, like the JPO program for the geographical, increasing geographical representation. Contact with universities that I've been personally involved in to try to get more students to apply, so that eventually they apply as staff members. And likewise, there are quite a number of steps that we need to take to improve the representation of women, particularly once again from the P4 and above. And there are quite a few interesting approaches that the UN has implemented as early as last year that we should also incorporate as a court, which will allow us to make some of the changes. One last point I want to make is really that there needs to be accountability on both of these for hiring managers. Right now, there are no consequences for not hiring on the basis of gender or geographical representation. We need to change that paradigm. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kuda.
Merci, Madame la Vice-Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice President,
À cette table ronde.
participants of the round table.
La question de la parité
Indeed, the issue of
et la
parity
représentativité
is very important, and geographical representation is crucial.
la première des justices
And I think that
qui doit
this is an issue which relates to justice, and therefore it should be held high by the ICC. I would just like to mention 3 or 4 possibilities. First of all,
discrimination positive.
we can engage in positive discrimination.
Comme en Afrique du Sud ou aux États-Unis,
For example, in the USA or South Africa, measures are taken to promote
les
certain categories such as women or people from certain
zones géographiques.
geographic areas.
Est-ce que pour un poste
So for one position, for example, could we try to really place an emphasis on people from a certain geographic area? I think that could help to contribute to successful outcomes. Secondly, we need to ensure that information is provided. A few days ago, I was also trying to implement such programs and projects where I work, but sometimes it's not effective. I think we need to have a long-term vision and take small steps along the way. Thirdly, we need to make sure that we clarify procedures for applying for international positions. So, for example, if you want to apply for international jobs, then you have to have international experience. And so sometimes it's difficult to have the right experience. I think that perhaps we should allow people to apply that have various different types of experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Ms. Donlon?
Thank you very much. Due to proactive management and mainstreaming activities this year at the Kosovo Specialist Chambers, the court reached parity at expert and management levels. If I were successful and elected, I would also apply extremely proactive management strategies to counteract underrepresentation, both geographic as well as gender. They would include ensuring gender and geographic diversity on recruitment panels, unconscious bias training for all recruitment panels and also all staff. In addition, I would give my full backing and support to the activities of the gender focal point to ensure that as head of registry, I support her endeavours in terms of improving representation. In relation to geographic representation, I would carry out outreach to states that are underrepresented. I would be very keen to identify where the resource pools are in countries that are underrepresented currently in the court, and also devise strategies on how to reach those resource pools. That could include online events with staff from the court speaking to resource pools about their experience and work in the ICC, as well as other methods mentioned by Christian, that is reaching universities, as well as perhaps promoting more internship programs to bring the court closer to qualified individuals in countries that are currently underrepresented. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Alban Alencastro.
Thank you very much. Indeed, one of the main areas where work is needed, not only at the ICC, but in international organizations in general, is underrepresentation of women, minorities, and certain nationalities in managerial and decision-making positions. I strongly believe that when hiring staff or appointing officials, it is essential to promote an adequate balance of gender, race, geographical origin. For instance, this is the first time that 3 Latin Americans are in the shortlist for the election of the registrar. This in order to ensure that all candidates will be valued for their merits, for their track record, not for their personal conditions, and also to make sure that those who have been at a disadvantage to access a job at an international organization because of their gender, their race, their geographic origin, or any other personal condition will not be discriminated against, and on the contrary, that affirmative action criteria and standards will be applied in the process. Once again, I believe it is a matter of transparency and accountability, which are fundamental to ensure diversity and to make sure that standards such as those proposed by G-Qual campaign, for instance, or the independent expert on sexual orientation and gender identity from the UN, as well as national good practices are implemented, and that the promotion and mentoring processes are put in place to reach more potential candidates, and with it, a more diverse managing staff.
Thank you. Last question. The ICC like other international courts and tribunals, has been criticized for its expense and purported lack of efficiencies. How would you address this criticism in implementing the broad mandate of the registry? Each candidate has 2 minutes to answer this question. I will start with Ms. Donlon, and then Mr. Kuda, Mr. Ma, Mr. Alban Allen Castro, and Ms. Tuma. Ms. Donlon, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. To pick up on a recommendation from the independent expert report with related to the use of key performance indicators, the report recommended using raw data based on qualitative indicators and improving to make the key performance reports more user-friendly. I feel the court has taken major steps in that direction, particularly with the 2021 key performance report. And that is something that is an incredibly valuable tool moving forward, because this is the report that shows the results. This is the report that shows how many victims have been contacted, how many witnesses are receiving welfare and well-being support as well as protection, as well as the ongoing essential work in the courtroom and measuring key judicial decisions against what are in deadlines in the Chamber's practice manual. It is an essential tool in communicating the critical work and the achievements of the court. To do so, again, a broader scheme of outreach to the states, the Assembly of State Parties, as well as the broader international community. This could be done by promoting the website of the court, ensuring that all of its proceedings are being streamed and people are aware so that they can actually watch the proceedings and come closer to the critical work and understanding why the hard-earned contributions of states are really absolutely used in the most efficient way to support trials of the most serious crimes of concern to the international community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kuda?
Merci, Madame la Vice-Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice President. Distinguished members of the Round Table. To answer this question, I would say that often people don't often understand why reductions have been made in certain cases. So I think we need to make sure that we approach litigants themselves and explain everything to them and make sure that we're transparent. It's important to communicate on all of these matters, and I want to just take the example of what we do here. Every year we have an open door session where we allow people to visit our workplace and show them exactly what we do. Because people often misunderstand what it is that we do, and they often have the wrong information. So I think it's very important to explain all of this to them. And if they don't understand this, it means they don't engage. And I think when it comes to cost reduction, I think people need to understand what would happen if the ICC wasn't there. To understand that if too much costs were reduced, then it could be damaging. So I think we need to, in general, increase the visibility of the court and raise awareness about the court. Provide people with information so that they can understand that the ICC is doing good work. And then lastly, I think we need to think about accountability. People need to be informed to ensure that they can understand what their contributions are working towards, their financial contributions. And I think with that understanding, we'll make progress in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ma?
Thank you very much. For me, once again, it really boils down to how we communicate this to our key interlocutors, namely our state's parties, and likewise to our the public at large in terms of how the resources that we receive are being spent, why it costs the money it costs in order for us to be able to carry out our activities. And once again, looking at our internal working procedures, I think we've taken steps to ensure greater transparency into how we work as a court. The measurable indicators that have been put in place is a major direction so that we have indicators. It's not that we're just telling you we're making good use of your money. These are they're quantifiable measures to be able to establish this. It's a fact. Likewise, starting with the 23 budget, we've made a very direct link between our strategic planning exercise and the use of KPIs. So once again, the strategy and the outputs and the money that's required to drive the outputs is very clearly linked. This message is primarily towards states, parties, and the governments that keep us funded. But at the same time, we need a parallel dialogue with public, and we do, but this is something we can always expand upon, which is the public information, being very clear about how the court operates, and an essential part of that are the resources and why and how we do things, and why it's not as simple as it may seem, why it seems very expensive to initiate a new situation. All these need to be explained, especially when we're getting more and more instances where others have a vested interest in explaining it otherwise. So we need to be on the forefront in explaining the resource needs and how value for money is being obtained by the taxpayer money we receive at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Alban Alencastro.
Thanks for the question. I believe we have to acknowledge the elephant in the room. An international court that after 20 years of operation has only addressed 31 cases is not precisely effective and efficient. And in this regard, I believe that the criticism to the court, to the system, is justified in the sense of the lack of efficiency. Not so much in the excessive expenditure, considering the complexities of the work of the court, considering the resources that should be invested in fulfilling its duties, particularly considering the distance of the court to the places where the international crimes are committed, and also the different approaches to cooperation that states where situations and investigations are open have with respect to the court. So once again, I have referred to this key aspect in my 5 previous answers, and once again, I will say that transparency is key. Administrative rationalization, the identification of priorities in order to build a program of work that uses wisely the resources allocated. But also, outreach is key to overcome this partially false perception that the court is not working or does not fulfill its purpose. And I think this is due to the lack of information about what the court does and the success it has had in the particular instances where it has intervened. But in particular, I believe that a more victim-centered approach is key, because if the victims, if the communities affected by international crimes are happy with the results of the actions of the court, it is likely that the credibility of the court, the legitimacy of the court will grow, and hence this false perception that the court is inefficient, that the court is expending too much, will also be gone. So thank you very much. That's my response.
Thank you very much. Ms. Tuma.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I've listened to the former speakers, and yes, we have seen that there is a lack of communication, and also there is also a criticism against the performances of the court. So that's why, of course, it's important to explain both for the state parties, other stakeholders, as well as the public at large, what the mandate is for ICC, what the ICC is actually doing, what kind of organs it has, the staff, etc., divisions, and so on. Communication outreach is very important, and how to do that. It can be used by the web page, as been mentioned here, but I also would use the field offices and also with contact with the civil societies. That could be seminars, it could be workshops in the Hague or in the field offices, individual meetings with representative of different state parties, also very useful to use universities as a platform as well for the future. Also, I've had my own experience in that, and universities is a very, very useful tool actually to get information and awareness of a global court that ICC is. And of course, to use the facts that has been mentioned here from different reports, etc. But at the end of the day, it is to communicate what the court is doing and how the money is spent. And that can be done, for instance, by the examples that I just mentioned. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Ambassador?
Thank you very much, Ms. Nkuma. We will now give candidates the opportunity to make concluding remarks. We will have these statements in a reversed alphabetical order, and candidates have been given up to 2 minutes each. I would like to invite Ms. Tuma to begin. You have the floor, Ms. Tuma.
Thank you very much. I will be very brief and just say it has been a truly honor for me to be invited to this roundtable discussion and, of course, to listen to all the answers that the fellow colleagues has presented here to the important questions that has been raised from the panel. Yeah, how to go from here to into the future with ICC and the registrar. The issues that has been touched upon and the answers that have been given can be part of this solution actually. But as always, when there is a big court or institution or organization, things need to be addressed by step. Rome was not built on one day. It will take time to address gender balance, geographic, or the criticism of the court, etc. But it's absolutely doable. I'm convinced of that. A global court that addresses the most grave crimes of the world, international crimes, it's here to stay. And that all of us in our different positions, even if we will not be elected as a registrar, can foster in different ways. If I would be appointed as a registrar, this would be a continuation of all what I have done in my life for international justice as a judge, a prosecutor, etc., and working in different workplaces. And I would truly commit to do my very best to advance international justice with the highest international standard that is possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now I would like to
And I take the opportunity to say good evening to all of you as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to invite Mr. Marr now. Mr. Marr, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice President, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to discuss my vision for the court and to address your questions. I believe that my vision for Continuity Plus, or continuity with important enhancements of registry services, strikes the right balance between continuing to build on the very positive trajectory within the registry and in creating the conditions conducive towards ensuring steady and consistent improvements and efficiencies in our daily work. Only by doing both of these things in parallel will we be ready to take on the tremendous challenges which await the registry and the court in the coming years. As someone who has worked very closely with the last two registrars over the past 6 years, I've gained tremendous insight into two things: the role of the registrar within this large and highly complex organization, and the importance that trust plays in the registrar's ability to successfully engage with a wide range of interlocutors that rely on registry services. I have led the registry's efforts in times of most serious crises, combining this with my experience of building up a new division from scratch and running a highly productive team of over 200 staff spread out across multiple duty stations. I'm confident that I will be able to skillfully and successfully lead the registry of the ICC. I look forward to working with other organs, states parties, and civil society in being a reliable and trustworthy partner in addressing together the challenges of the future. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Kuda. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much. If I'm allowed to conclude in English, I would say that I have more than 20 years of practice and experience at the national and continental level in procedure informs, the right of the defense, and the assistance of victims and witnesses. And I really think that I can do something. I will help ICC to go forward. But I think that the most important thing, or let's say the biggest challenge of ICC nowadays, is the cooperation of the state parties. Or let's say the cooperation with the states. Because we know that they play a very important role from the beginning of the procedure to the end. Even the countries who are not party yet, when crimes are committed on their territories, we need their contribution from the beginning to the end. And we know that as far as they're concerned, concerning the states, the methods of pressure are seldom. We have to use explanation, diplomacy. When to proceed through accountability. I need to convince them that the same situation that is benefit, that is only one situation that is helpful for all the being is the rule of law.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And now I will turn to Ms. Donlon. Ms. Donlon, you have the floor.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, throughout my career, I have successfully led teams to deliver excellent services to enable judges and other participants in proceedings to conduct fair and expeditious trials. My work in countries where atrocities occurred and participation in events with civil society and affected communities has given me an understanding of the different perspectives of victims and the critical need to build connectivity with them. Every day, this experience inspires me to do the best job I can to lead a registry that meaningfully communicates with victims and enables them to safely participate in proceedings. It would be an honour to apply this experience and contribute to the ICC's efforts to bridge the gap between The Hague and situation countries. Of course, no matter how much we plan and manage risk, it is inevitable that crises will arise. I am well equipped to deal with tough challenges, be that ensuring business continuity and detainee well-being during the pandemic, urgent matters that impact the security of witnesses, or challenges to the effective functioning of a court. When unforeseen problems arise, I remain steady and exercise good judgment that is informed by my 22 years' experience in the field of international criminal justice. On the upcoming 25th anniversary of the adoption of the Rome Statute, I would relish the opportunity to contribute to the ICC and enable the court to realise its ambitions and full potential in the coming years. My candidacy offers the reassurance of direct experience, the evidence of results delivered, and the commitment to always adapt and grow for the future. Excellencies, it will be a privilege to serve as head of the ICC Registry and lead staff to deliver services of the highest standards to support the judges of the court and trials of the most serious crimes of international concern. Thank you for the privilege to address you today and to answer your questions.
Thank you very much. And now I'd like to ask Mr. Alban to take the floor.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. In these final remarks, I would like to emphasize that the set of professional, academic, but above all, human experiences that I have accumulated over 24 years of distinguished career in international justice and human rights, both in local as well as in international contexts, place me in a privileged position to be the catalyst element and coordinate the efforts of all stakeholders to promote the institutional change that the court and especially the registry require to live up to the expectations of the world and especially of the victims to be the last bastion of justice in the face of what the statute rightly calls unimaginable atrocities. New blood is required to face such a challenge. Institutional change is unlikely to happen without new leadership and vision. And understanding that the registry is mostly an administrative and financial organ, in fulfilling my mandate, I will always bear in mind the unwavering respect for human dignity and the commitment of the state parties and the civil society organizations with the tireless fight for truth, justice, and reparation in face of international crimes, as well as the fundamental role that the registry can play in fulfilling the promise of justice that the ICC represents for the world. Thank you very much for listening to my points of view and responses.
Thank you. And thank you very much to all of you. This concludes this first session of the roundtable. I'd like to thank all of our candidates for their contributions in this very interesting discussion. I thank my co-moderator, both on behalf of states parties and civil society. I'd like to thank the state parties and civil society for their comprehensive questions provided to us. And last but not least, my thanks go to the interpreters for their very good job. Tomorrow, we will continue with the second session of the roundtable with the remaining 5 candidates. Thank you very much to all of you. This session is adjourned.